Good afternoon. My name is Battalion Chief Heath Meyer with Davie Fire Rescue. I'm here today to do a little presentation. It's a national campaign going on. It's called Stop the Bleed. This campaign was started after the Sandy Hook tragedy, where obviously we all know what happened there with about 20 some odd people losing their life. When the investigation came out and they realized that they possibly could have saved about 50% of the people that had passed away there, that were shot and killed. This campaign came into effect. It is basically meant for traumatic injuries. It doesn't matter what the injury is as far as what caused the trauma, but it's meant to stop the bleeding, which is what will kill us if we don't take care of it. With me, I have an artificial limb that I will go over what we're going to do with that. Stop the Bleed, like I said, is a national campaign. It's been going on for about 8 years now. You can look up online and you can get a Stop the Bleed kit. You can look it up, National Stop the Bleed. There's several different places that sell them. In those kits, you have tourniquets, you have gloves, you have chest pads, chest seals in some of them. And what it's used for is basically in an accident, any sort of accident, whether it be gunshot, stabbing, auto vehicle accident, chainsaw, any saw, where we have the significant bleeding, the arterial bleed, which is a bright red squirting blood. Well, what we have to do is the first person there is really the person who's going to save this person's life. And that person has to react as fast as possible, slow down the bleeding, and call 911. The Stop the Bleed campaign is meant to slow it down, to buy this person time. We have medical emergencies where we have AEDs nationally and locally. A lot of people have them, a lot of stores have them. And then we have the Stop the Bleed kit. The Stop the Bleed kit is for traumatic injuries. They've been used in car accidents. They've been used in chainsaw accidents, circular saw accidents, all sorts of different things. The arteries, like I said, it cause bright red spurting blood. They are deep within the body. So in order to cut an artery, you have to cut deep. But if that does happen, you will see that bright red squirting blood out. We have different sorts of bleeding. We have capillary bleeding. That's the bleeding you see on the face, on the hands. It's like an oozing type bleeding. Then you have venous bleeding, where it's a darker red blood, and you can pretty much put pressure on that and it'll stop it. But the arteries, it's very significant because the arteries have a constant pressure. So when the heart's beating, the blood squirts, and then when the heart stops beating, when the heart's relaxing, there's still pressure, so that the blood will continuously come out. People will die and bleed out in 3 to 5 minutes, depending on what artery is cut and how significant it's cut. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over Stop the Bleed kit. We're going to teach you what to do with it, and we're going to go over the importance of acting as fast as you possibly can. And it doesn't take a lot of training to learn this, but it's the recognition of what's important. So in the kits, we have tourniquets, which they have all different colors. The kits have orange because it's visible, it can be seen. If you look on it, you can write the time that it was placed on the person. And the important part is to get things done. Some of the kits have what's called quick clot, which basically an open wound, you stuff that into the open wound. It's really meant for the armpit area and the groin area. It's not meant for the abdominal cavity. It's not meant for, you can use it on arms, legs, but it's not the true way to stop it, but it can be used. But this is meant for in the groin area and the armpit area where we can't get a tourniquet. Stop the Bleed, anything that's the chest, the neck, or the torso, we obviously can't use a tourniquet. Tourniquets are meant to cut the circulation off. There's no way to put a tourniquet around the body to stop the circulation through the body. If you put a tourniquet around a person's neck, obviously that's not good either, because they're going to die from something else prior to bleeding out. But the arms and the legs, we use a tourniquet. But for the chest, neck, torso, what we're going to do is we're going to apply direct pressure. We could use anything to apply direct pressure. They say you want to use something dry and sterile. Realistically, it doesn't matter. If you only have a t-shirt on you, take it. We're going to simulate this right here is an entry wound. We're going to act like this is the person's torso. You're going to take it. You're going to apply direct pressure. You're going to hold it as long as you can, and you're going to try to slow it down. Remember, calling 911 is important. At the same time you're doing this, you could call 911. Given the best description of where you are. Obviously, your safety is priority, so if there's a dangerous incident going on around you, you could just dial 911 from your cell phone. Don't say anything, put it on mute, and let them GPS your phone, as a call that's unknown what it is, nobody's talking, and they'll dispatch police and possibly fire, depending on where you are and what their local protocols are. Here in Davie, South Florida, 911 calls, typically they're going to dispatch both. But depending on your location, it may change accordingly. So remember what I told you, anything for the chest, the abdominal cavity, the neck, all of that, or the back, it's pretty much direct pressure, and direct pressure is really what we could do. If you have somebody who's bleeding from the chest and you see the air bubbles basically means that the lungs have been compromised. So somebody was stabbed, some sort of injury has gone through to the lungs, and you have that bright red blood. So therefore, an artery near the lungs is bleeding. Well, they have what we call chest seals. The chest seal is usually a clear patch that you basically take it, you put it on, and it will help that person retain their air. We need to do something when we get on scene to relieve that. But as far as the lay person, if you just slow down the air from escaping, that's going to help prolong that person's life. Obviously, without oxygen, the blood will circulate, but they're going to lose oxygen. Blood's going to go to the body, and they're not going to have enough oxygen for the cells. Cells will die. So the longer you could prolong their life, the better chance they have of survival. With trauma, we know the golden hour, that's the first hour, is the most important. But with an arterial bleed, it's really the first 3 to 5 minutes that's significant. So the person that's there, if they could slow down the bleeding, like I told you, anything, any shirt, anything that will absorb blood. But once you put it on, don't take it off to look to see if it slowed down. When you do that, you're actually removing a potential clot that's formed, and then it's going to start bleeding all over again. Remember, they're big arteries. It's a pump. It's going to push a lot. So the faster you cover it up and you hold it in place for as long as you can, the better chance they have of survival. We're looking to buy these people time for the first responders to get on scene, but the people that are there are the true first responder. They're the one who's buying them the time that they need to get to the hospital. Doesn't matter what the injury is. If they have an arterial bleed, time is not on their side. So the more time you could buy them, the better off the better chance of their survival. So we have an entry wound for a gunshot. We have an exit wound for a gunshot. Obviously, this is not a true person's body. This is an artificial limb. But if you see my finger, it's about 2.5 inches long. I could go all the way inside. Okay, so therefore that's telling you that it's a deep wound. Remember what I said, the arteries run along the bones. So if it's on the arms, they run in here, they run through the joint, they run in the bottom of the wrists. So very important that we slow that down as fast as possible. The abdominal cavity, bigger arteries, just leaving the heart, and then it branches as it goes away to a smaller artery and so on and so forth. Arteries lead away from the heart. So basically that's the oxygenated blood being pumped out to the body. We do have constant pressure in them, so it's very important that we deal with it as fast as possible. Okay, if it's the groin area or the armpit area, what we do is we have what's called quick clot, and in these kits, you'll see there's different brands. There's a brand called Quick Clot. Now, what we want to do is we want to basically, you take your knee and you stick it right in the armpit, and you try to slow it down while you take care of it. So if it's right in the armpit, guess what? The quick clot is going to get stuffed right in the wound. So we're going to act like this wound is in the armpit, and I'm going to take this quick clot, which is obviously just trainer, and I'm going to throw it over my shoulder. I want to reach into the limb or reach into the chest cavity, find where the bleeding is, and then with my other hand, I'm going to take this quick clot and I'm going to slide it in and try to keep pressure on that artery that's bleeding and stuff it in as fast as possible. When I get as much as I can into the wound, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest that I have. I never pull it out. I never remove it. I'm going to take the rest that I have. We're going to act like this is all stuffed in there, and I'm going to hold it for 3 minutes. At 3 minutes, I'm going to wrap something around it to hold it in place. I do not want this to remove. This quick clot almost turns into like a jelly-like material, and it'll help clot the blood. It'll help the blood clot. It's just an assistant. So if it's not blood, it's not going to coagulate. So it's the blood and the chemicals that are on the quick clot that help it clot. Now, so we could do that in the armpits, in the abdominal cavity. Like I told you, it's direct pressure. The chest, if it's the chest and we see those air bubbles, that's a lung issue. So we're going to use a chest seal. If we don't have a chest seal, just say we have a clear, any sort of package. We could basically take this package, and if we tape it on all four sides over the chest where the wound is, that'll actually help keep the oxygen, air inside. Now, like I said, we have to deal with that when we get there, but that'll help them, rather than losing the oxygen and losing the air from their lungs, it'll help them continue oxygenating their blood. So it's very important that we deal with it as fast as possible. Now, we also have a stab wound, a laceration, anything along that line. Remember, when you cut something, it basically causes a big void under the skin. So depending on what the cut is from, if it's a chainsaw, if it's a circular saw, if it's a knife, you get a big wound underneath the skin. If anybody's ever torn a bicep muscle and they see the bicep just separates, that's just a tearing on the inside. But just imagine that void if you actually cut through the skin and you get that same void. There's a lot of space in there, a lot of blood can be lost before it's seen. So we need to take care of it right away. So obviously a torn bicep, it's not an arterial bleed, it's a muscular issue, but we're talking about that arterial bleed, that bright red squirting blood. Very important that we deal with it as fast as possible. So if it's an arm or leg, what I try to tell people, just imagine, when did the injury happen? If you don't know, guess what? You almost want to go to the tourniquet as fast as possible, because they're in the field, they're not in a hospital. These people, the more blood we contain in their body, the more their chance of survival. So if I try to direct pressure and hold it, well, when did it happen? I don't know. Well, what if it happened 3 minutes ago and it's the leg? We'll simulate this is my upper leg and I got cut 3 minutes ago. Well, how much blood did I lose from the time you found me till now? Remember what I said, in 3 to 5 minutes, people will bleed out. So if I try to put pressure, well, they could already be in the decomposition phase and they could already be going downhill on the way to dying. So if I try to hold pressure and they lose a little more blood, that may be the last of the blood they have, that their heart's going to continue pumping. So that's why we typically will say, put pressure where you can. Remember what I told you, you could actually put your knee right into the person's groin and it's like a pressure point. You basically take, if it's the left leg, I'm going to take my right knee and I'm going to put my right knee right into their groin. We're going to lay this down. So my knee is in their groin. I take the tourniquet apart. I'm going to go underneath their leg. And I always want to be pulling this red towards me. So I go underneath their leg and I have to go as high on the limb as possible. So we're going to stand this up so you can see it and wrap it around as high on the limb as possible. They used to tell you go 2 to 3 inches above the wound. Now they say go on the highest limb as possible, because what they realized, if people had multiple injuries, now I try to go at the first injury and then I put it on and I take this and I pull it as tight as I can. Once I pull it as tight as I can, obviously this is artificial, we can't tell, but I should have slowed down the bleeding. Once I put that on, I don't need to feel for a pulse. What I do is I take this rod, it's called a windlass rod, I take it, I spin it, make it as tight as you can till the blood stops pumping, till it stops pushing out. When I do that, take it, it doesn't matter which way I spin it, I can spin it either way, because if you look at this clip looks like a C. So if I spin it to the right, it catches this side. If I spin it to the left, it catches the other side. So it doesn't matter. But I'm going to spin it. I'm going to put it in place. Once I put it in place, take it, wrap it over. If I have a pen or a marker or something, I can write the time. Once I put a tourniquet on somebody's body, I never remove it. I let the professionals, the doctors at the hospital remove that tourniquet. What happens is our body starts producing an acid, and our body has a natural pH of 7.4, which is a base. So we start producing that acid in the extremity, whether it's my arm or my leg, we start producing an acid in that extremity. When I go and release that tourniquet, that acid goes directly to my heart, which is the most important muscle we have, and it could actually put me into cardiac arrest. So they may not have bled out, but they could go into cardiac arrest because of the acid. Therefore, once I put a tourniquet on, the tourniquet stays on, and we wait for the medical professionals to come, the first responders to come, or we get them to the hospital as fast as we possibly can. If the first responders are too far away and you're nearby and you can get them to a hospital, get them to a hospital. You don't have to wait for a 911 call. If they're right there near a hospital and you're outside, get them inside. Let them deal with it. That's the definitive care. These people need a trauma center. So the local hospital you may take them to may not be able to help them. They may end up transferring them out to a trauma center. The only way to fix their actual underlying problem is with surgery. Surgery is the definitive care for these people. So therefore, if I take them to a local hospital that only deals with kids and they don't deal with trauma and they don't deal with medical emergency, I really want a trauma 1 facility. So look in your area, see what's a trauma 1 facility, and that's who we want to get these people to. They have the trauma surgeons on staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we want to get these people to that area. I've placed a tourniquet on. I've seen it put on. I've seen people use a tourniquet. I've witnessed people that have walked away after using a tourniquet. So a tourniquet does not necessarily mean somebody's going to lose their arm or leg. The tourniquet basically means we're buying them time to possibly save their leg or their arm. If their injury is so bad that there's no fixing the damaged limb, just say somebody had their arm cut in a, some sort of meat processor or grinder or something like that, and it's shredded. Well, it doesn't matter what we do. The tourniquet isn't what killed their arm. The fact that they lost all their fingers and their lower arm into that machine, that's why they lost their arm. Nothing to do with the tourniquet. They've saved limbs up to 2 hours with a tourniquet on. Depending on where we are, obviously the time is important, but here in South Florida in Broward County, it's not as important for us because I know that I could be at any trauma facility within 15 to 20 minutes. And if somebody's putting a tourniquet on, guess what? They go into the hospital as fast as they possibly can. So that being said, so it's not as important to write the time on there. Like I told you, if you can write it, you write it. If you can't, you can't. The important thing is get it on them. Get it on them. Stop the bleeding as fast as possible. That will buy them the time to survive. They may lose the extremity. They may lose the arm or leg. It's called life over limb. Save their life, they may lose their limb. But in order to save their life, we got to stop the bleeding. Remember, our bodies are all a little different. Time is different for everybody. I may have so much blood today, and then I do a lot of work outside. I become dehydrated. Obviously, when I become dehydrated, I lose some blood as well. Women, obviously, you have your menstrual cycle. You're losing blood daily during that. So bleeding that may happen today, you don't know their underlying condition. So you don't know how much blood they can afford to lose. I want to lose as little blood as possible because the more blood I save, the better my chance of survival. Survival is the key. So put it on, keep it on, don't take it off. If you have somebody, remember what I told you, your safety is priority. Well, if you happen to be in a situation where there's a mass shooting and it means me going in the hallway to save somebody's life, but there's a shooter down at the end of the hallway, that as soon as I put my head out the door, he's going to shoot me or she's going to shoot me, guess what? I'm sorry, but that person's got to wait. If you walk into a situation where you come into and there's multiple people on the ground, you're one person. You can't save everybody. Pick one person that you think you can save. If there's tourniquets available, great. If there's no tourniquets available, you have things on you that you may be able to use. But remember, if you go and make a tourniquet, which is not necessarily recommended, but it's not the worst thing in the world. If it means saving somebody's life, if you have a belt, use a belt that's more than an inch. Some people wear lanyards around the neck. If it's a shoelace lanyard, it's too thin. You need something that's at least 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. Take it, wrap it around their arm, tie it. You tie a knot, and you start twisting that knot. Everything within that knot is going to tighten up. So if I was to just take this tourniquet, and we're going to act like this tourniquet is just a belt, and I wrap this around somebody's leg, and I go and tie a knot just like this. And then I make my second knot, which is difficult because there's plastic on here, but I make my second knot. When I make my second knot and I start twisting this, we're going to act like I put a second knot, and I start twisting this, you could see it's making the leg skinnier. It's tightening it up, right? The only thing when you do something like that is your hands are committed to this one person. So if you have a tourniquet, use the tourniquet. But if you have to commit to one person, remember, saving one person's life is better than helping 15 and they all die. So if you come into a situation where you have multiple people down, and I happen to be the person by the door, and I have 7 bullet wounds to my chest, and I'm gasping, I'm pretty much about to die. But if you look 15 feet past me, you may have somebody on the ground who's got a bullet wound to the leg and a bullet wound to the arm. You could save their life faster than you're going to save my life. But if you try saving my life, they may die as well. So you have to look and say, who can I save? Do the best you can. This is basically, you're protected by the Good Samaritan law, unless you do something negligent. You take a tourniquet, put a tourniquet around somebody's neck, guess what? You're negligent. You're going to kill them, they're going to suffocate. But if you take a tourniquet and put it on their arm or leg, you're saving their life. If they fight with you, leave them alone. They're in shock. They don't know what's going on. You fighting with them is not going to help the situation. You may get injured. But that being said, people, when they start bleeding, the more blood they lose, they will go unconscious before they die. If that person was fighting with you and that's the only person, and there's nobody else that you could help, you see them go unconscious, you can now initiate care. Because they're unconscious, they're not coming back to. They are unconscious. If they come back to and they start fighting you again, you walk away. Your safety is most important. If you start helping them, there's nothing in the law that says, well, they told me when they were bleeding to leave them alone, let them die. Now you go and help them. You've done nothing wrong. The law basically says you can do whatever a rational person would want done. So a rational person in the right frame of mind, if they get cut, they want to stop it. So that's basically where you're protected. Okay? One thing about these tourniquets, when you go and put it on, I'm going to put one on myself so you can see how tight you have to put it. So I'm just going to put this one back together. And this little red tab, see that tab at the end? I always want to be pulling that towards myself. So I'm going to put this on my arm. And when I put it on my arm, you want to pull it as tight as you can possibly pull it. Notice how high on my arm I've gone. So if you could go higher, go higher. When I put one tourniquet on, I can always put a second, but I have to go above. So I put it on pretty tight, right? Haven't cut the circulation off, but I've slowed it down a little because I could already feel my pressure building up. Now, remember, I'm not bleeding, but if I was bleeding, it would have slowed down. When I take this and I spin this rod, the windlass rod, and I make it nice and tight, and I go and do that, I've now cut the circulation off to my hand. If you look at my hand, you can see there are 2 different colors. I've cut the circulation off to my hand. Cut the circulation off to my arm, my bicep, my wrist. Everything, it's no circulation right now. This is only for training. So I'm gonna undo this, but typically if I put that on, I leave it. When it's tight enough, the bleeding will stop. You will also feel a numbness and tingling in the extremity. If you have to do it to yourself, remember you could do it to yourself. So don't think somebody else has to help you. I just showed you how easy it is. I am a righty, so I'll put it on my right arm now, and you'll see how easy it is. Because typically working on your forearm is a lot easier, but I'm a righty. I put it on, make it as tight as I can make it, and then I take my left hand and I spin this. And once I spin it tight enough, I already feel it's pretty tight. I always tell people, when you think you have it tight enough, try to go another half a turn. Because when it's tight enough, the blood will stop, but remember, you're building pressure up behind it. My circulation's cut off right now. Same thing, look at my hands, total different color. I'm gonna undo that because it's not comfortable, but if I was bleeding, I wouldn't be undoing that, okay? Very important, act fast, call 911. Remember, you are the true first responder. You're getting involved will save a life. You don't have to get involved, but remember, if it was you or if it was somebody you love, you would hope the person there would get involved. All these kits, these stop the bleed kits, they actually have gloves inside. If you don't have gloves, you could always take a plastic bag. You could take a supermarket bag. You could take a Ziploc bag. You could take a sandwich bag. Put it over your hands. It gives you a little protection. Most people, if you're bleeding, unless you have open wounds on your hands, you could take your hands after, you could go wash them off, and nothing's gonna happen to you, right? Your hands are a barrier. Your skin is a barrier for your entire body. So unless you compromise your skin, you have a barrier. We always wear gloves for an extra barrier because, God forbid, we have a pinhole or something. But remember, soap and water afterwards, 15, 20 seconds, and then you're good to go. So at this point, that's the end of it. Remember, chest, abdominal cavity, neck, direct pressure, chest with air bubbles. You're going to put a chest seal, take it, undo it, chest seal, arms or legs, pressure and tourniquet. If you need to put a second tourniquet, like I told you, you have one tourniquet on, you put it as high as you could go, put the second tourniquet higher. And in the arms, we have our pressure point in here is right in the armpit. If I'm working on my right arm, I'm going to take the knee, stick my knee in here, so I could actually look at the arm and I could work on the arm while I had my knee in there. So if I'm working on the right side of a person's body, I'm going to take my right knee into this here, and I'm going to work on that. If I'm on the left side of the, if I'm on the left side of the body and I'm doing a leg, I'm going to take my right knee. If I'm doing the arms, I'm going to take the opposite knee. This way I have the capability of reaching to the fingertips, doing what I have to do while I have that knee to slow down the bleeding. That being said, thank you for your time. I will be on when it's time for some questions. Hope everybody stays safe, healthy, and good luck. Thank you.